His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Government of the Hellenic Republic, and on behalf of the Greek Minister of Environment and Energy, I welcome you to this side event, kindly hosted at the European Union Pavillion here in Sharm-el-Sheikh at COP27. My name is Alexandra Zdoukou. I'm the So the negative impacts of climate change, as we all know, become more pronounced in everyday life. Islands across the world are facing enormous and unprecedented challenges. We see severe disruptions to their natural environment, rising sea level, extreme weather events, deterioration of coastal conditions. All these are directly associated with climate change. Furthermore, insular communities are facing a number of socioeconomic impacts that inhibit their growth and prosperity. Climate change threatens traditional economic sectors that islands depend on, such as fisheries, agriculture, and tourism. At the same time, we all know that this increases health risks for island populations and maximizes the dangers of social displacement. And in this context, climate change adaptation measures for islands have been at the forefront of climate change discussions for decades. Even though overall emissions by islands are relatively small globally, there are still significant gains to be made by implementing holistic mitigation policies. And in certain cases, such as the Greek islands that depend largely on fossil fuels for electrification, cutting those emissions by switching to renewables can be a game changer. Today, technology gives us unique possibilities to implement smart and innovative solutions and achieve measurable and visible results quickly. But there's also a semantic, allow me to say, value in making islands greener and more sustainable, in making some of the most vulnerable communities to climate change. I think that this sets a paradigm for action against climate change. Therefore, the need for climate change mitigation for and by islands, small island states, and insular communities in general is a highly relevant topic. So in Greece, and this is why we're all here today, we have implemented some pilot projects for the green and sustainable transformation of 4 islands as a beginning of the Aegean archipelago. In a few moments, we will show you a video showcasing the progress that has been achieved in some of these islands, in Naxos, Astipalea, Tilos, and Halki. And following that, me and my colleague here at the Ministry, Petros Varelidis, who is the Secretary General for Environment at the Ministry where we work, will be interrogated, I would say, by our moderator, Nick Going. Thank you so much for being here. So we are going to discuss what we learned from this process and where we plan to take it next. Welcome, Nick and Petros. And now let's watch the video and start the discussion.
The country of more than 6,000 islands, known for their beauty and history. After 4 millennia of civilization, the Greek islands today thrive and prosper. Modern communities founded on growing economies exploiting ample natural resources, but also the historic ingenuity and entrepreneurship of their populations. In the last 3 years, the Greek government decided to make Greek islands beacons of green and digital transformation, setting the paradigm for action against climate change. The program, Greco Islands, aims to transform the islands of Greece into models of green economy, energy self-sufficiency, digital innovations, and sustainable mobility. This is how this journey begins. Smart Island of Naxos. Utilization of cloud services to create smart infrastructures and solutions that improve everyday life. A partnership of more than 20 companies and organizations. The Telos Project. Increased penetration of renewable energy sources. First zero-waste island in the world. The Astypalia Project. Astypalia Project involves a completely new and advanced transportation system. Astypalia is becoming a model for green and smart living. The Halki Project. A holistic approach targeting all key infrastructure. Improving living standards for island residents and visitors' experience. The islands of Tylos, Naxos, Astypalia and Halki were the testing ground for introducing a holistic transformation process to make Greek islands green and digital. The international attention attracted, but also the enthusiastic reception by the primary beneficiaries, the residents of the 4 islands themselves, speak for the success of the model. And with this success as the legacy of the first phase, Greece commits to a plan for the transformation of all the remaining islands of its archipelagos. An ambitious plan, a challenging aspiration for the future, a promise for resilient, sustainable, ecologically balanced islands in Greece. A vision for Greco Islands.
Tremendous. Excellent. Wish we were there. Look at how wonderful the weather is as well, which means it's powering the solar cells, but maybe not blowing the wind quite as much. But Peter, first of all, what is your audit so far of this experiment? You had 200 inhabited islands out of 6,000. On those islands where you've had this, you've had 4,000 to 5,000 people. What has been the change you have seen?
Actually, on some of these islands, we have the population ranges from 500 people to 2,500 people. So these are small islands, with the exception of Naxos, that we have about 25,000 people. So we have a medium-sized island for Greek islands, and also some small islands. These are pilot projects that prove that the private sector and the public sector can work together and make a change. Because here, what is the big innovation of these 4 specific projects that we saw on these videos is exactly the fact that it's not that the state put so much money, but we managed to attract private investment, putting their money in it, obviously for marketing reasons. There must be a gain for them. But that allowed us to change the everyday habits of people. In some islands, in the small islands, it's obviously easier. But there is a clear difference in the way they live their life every day because they have to pick up their garbages and select their garbages in a different manner. They learn how important it is to have renewables in their island because these renewables serve their needs. Because
How adaptable have they shown themselves to be?
very much, actually, very much, and they think they have understood that this is an asset for them. It's a good branding. They get a good name, so it's an asset that attracts more people there, more tourism. So the greening of the island is a positive branding for them in the global touristic market. So
Now-
they're very positive to it.
Alexandra, what about waste? What about water? What are the things which come under your responsibility? How much has that changed?
Thank you, Nick. And let me also agree on that, the concept of the GR Eco Islands is, of course, it's a top-down approach because the government has set this strategic initiative to transform the Greek islands into smart and green, but it's a bottom-up approach at the same time. And from the experience we had from these 4 islands, we see that people living in this place, they really embraced the project because ultimately these interventions on the islands changed completely the way they live. And this is besides the purpose of the Greco Islands initiative to have a socio-economic impact on the life of these islands. But apart from locals, we all know that Greece is famous about its touristic products, so everyone is visiting the Greek islands to enjoy them. Greece depends largely on tourism. This is a major contributor on the GDP. So this has a benefit also for all visitors. And talking about what you asked me about water and waste management, which is one of the pillars under the Greco Islands initiative, let me just open a parenthesis here and say that this initiative has a holistic approach. We want to convert these islands into green islands as we are moving towards this energy transition, but on a holistic way. What do we mean on a holistic way? We touch on several pillars. The first one is the energy sector, how we produce the energy on these islands. The second one is what you mentioned, the sustainable way of treating the natural resources on the island, waste and water. And all these islands, the third one is the digitalization. We have serious problems, in these islands about making their lives simpler in terms of digitalizing a lot of things on it. The e-mobility, the energy efficiency, the biodiversity. So all of them, if you deal with all of them as a package of interventions, then ultimately you will have the result that we envision, which is changing completely the development model on these islands and have them, first of all, green with less emissions.
Let's talk about the basics first of all, though. These islands are not connected to the main electricity supplies.
Yes.
They have to generate their own electricity through diesel, through petrol. First of all, that. And secondly, where this is going in terms of the future and the opportunity that there is now with the change. In other words, they have become independent on energy in a way which is different to the way it was, but it doesn't connect them to the mainland yet.
You're very right. And here, let me explain that, okay, we have 200 more or less inhabited islands in Greece, but currently 29 of them are autonomous energy systems. What does this mean? This means that they base their electricity production from old and polluting power plants that burn, yes, diesel to generate electricity.
And cars as well?
cars as well. They
Yep.
take their energy from there. We made a rough estimation. From these 29 autonomous energy systems, we have around 1.5 million tons of CO2 emissions per year. And we also need around 300 million euros per year for the fuel supply. We need to bring the fuels on these islands and use them for the electricity generation. So the concept, obviously, so we cannot speak about sustainable islands when all the energy is coming from, dirty fossil fuels. So what we are doing through this project is we try to replace, switch off in a way, these power plants from the islands and replace them with, and here is the innovation element that comes from this project. We replace them with new systems, hybrid systems. When we talk about hybrid systems, we mean either a photovoltaic park or a wind park in combination with a battery storage system so that we can store the energy there. The ultimate goal is to have, in the beginning, a 50% penetration of renewables as a starting point, but the target is by 2030 to reach to a target of 80% of renewables coming from...
Now, I've got to talk about money. No one's going to do this without an incentive. Where is the money coming from, Peter? Is it coming from your national government? Is it coming from the European Union? Are there grants? Are there enabling facilities which people can use? What has been the incentive to do it? Because this is a costly operation.
First of all, as Alexandra said, that right now we're heavily subsidizing the electricity production.
But does that come from the national government or from the EU?
On these islands, and that comes from the Greek citizens that they pay their taxes, and the government pays the extra, covers the extra cost, because the electricity price is one price for all the country. It's not different in the islands. So it makes sense from an economic point of view. But of course, there is a lot of funding coming from EU, from cohesion funds. Obviously, there are some running projects for the interconnection of some of the largest islands. But the most important sum of money comes from a dedicated decarbonization fund that we are establishing that handles the money from 25 million allowances that we got from the ETS during the last ETS
the emission trading
review.
scheme.
Yeah, the emission trading scheme. 25 million allowances, it means with current prices 2 billion euros. It's 80
How important has that been, though, as an incentive to do this? I'm trying to work out the psychology of this.
We, for the first time in the history of Greek state, we have so much money to dedicate them to a very concrete geographical area, the islands, and mostly the non-connected islands, and with very specific terms and with a very specific goal. So the money will not be diffused everywhere, because the money has to go to the decarbonization of the electricity supply of these islands. And given the fact that the average percentage of subsidy is about 40%, that means about 5 billion euros projects that have to be implemented in the next 5 to 6 years in these islands.
But judging by the video with electric cars on islands, and also what has to be changed within homes and what has to be changed within the infrastructure, what kind of financial support is there? Because that can be expensive for a private individual.
Yes, of
It's
course. First of all, what we do is we pay for the interconnection, and that will absorb about 3 billion euros out of the 5 billion euros that I told you. But for the rest, we have, for example, we have about 200 million euros for cold ironing. That means giving the possibility to have electric ships, because cold ironing is when you plug the ship into the electricity, and you get power from electricity. And that equals 400 million euros investment. We have 100 million euros for solar rooftops. Of course, we're not going to flood Greek islands with solar rooftops. We will allow them wherever it is allowed from an architectural point
Does
of
that
view.
go to the individuals and their houses?
That goes to the individuals, yes.
So it's like a financial grant.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, let me add on that. It's a combination, Nick, of state incentives under the form of, for example, for the mobility, we provide we provide grants to households and businesses to replace their cars with electric cars. And within the European Union, I would say that just for the Greco Islands initiative, we are a country that offers quite generous, I would say, financial incentives to replace a car with an electric one. And then we make tailor-made programs for this initiative. What I mean with this, I mean dedicated programs, for example, for energy innovation on all buildings on the islands, public sector buildings, hotels, and all kind of buildings. We understand that CO2 emissions come largely from the building sector. So if we want to discuss about a real decarbonization, we need to focus a lot on buildings. And this is why we pay a lot of attention on specific either grants or tax incentives in combination that will incentivize people that are living there to change their habits.
The reason I'm asking that is that there are a lot of people here who don't live in Greece and will be saying, now, what am I taking away from this? And what I'm taking away is the importance of the government or central government incentive financially, both on money, but also in making sure that the program goes ahead. I come from a country where everyone is being encouraged to change their boilers, but there's no financial incentive. Therefore, it's expensive. No one does it. And what you seem to be saying is, we can do it, you can do it, if there's clear financial incentives. So I'm trying to take this beyond the Greek island experience into how others can learn from what you are doing. You're lucky because you've got the European scheme to support you, and that's been funding the majority of it so far. But there'll come a point where the public, in order to do this on a mass scale, will say, I demand money. I will do it if you give me money, whether it be EVs or boilers or the electrical system. What is your reflection on that, about how important that incentive is to making this scheme work?
What we try to do is we try to have targeted incentives. For example, we give extra incentives for the companies that rent cars in the islands, and that creates a paradigm.
Is that Volkswagen, the Volkswagen example?
It's not only Volkswagen. It's
Citroën as well.
We're talking about, generally speaking, the companies that rent cars. That you go as a tourist and you rent a car. We give subsidies. We plan to give subsidies to these companies to replace their cars with electric cars. It doesn't matter if they're Volkswagen or Tesla or any other brand. So we focus to those activities that have a lot of impact on their sector, because that serves as a paradigm, and it creates a momentum to the island, because the island is a small society, and one takes the example from the other. So if you have a critical mass, if you achieve a critical mass, then the society, the rest of the people move forward because it becomes a fashion. So we want this to become a fashion.
Is that where you think you're getting to already, Alexander? Making this fashionable, acceptable, something people want to do?
It's not only the trendy part of the project. You mentioned that you come from UK. Yes, Nick, it's true that we are lucky that we are part of the European Union, and therefore we have the privilege of taking a considerable amount of European money through structural funding.
But that's critical for this.
That's very critical, yes. It's critical for the whole green transition of our country and for achieving the targets under the European Green Deal. Let me tell you that our Prime Minister was one of the first ones back in 3 years ago when he decided to set quite ambitious national targets in order to achieve, the European Green Deal. And now with the Fit for 55 package, we want to go even more ambitious. So this energy transition obviously costs. And it costs because it also has innovative elements. And the innovation and technology needs more money to leverage. So yes, we are taking advantage of the money coming from the European Union. Just to mention that for the next period of time, between 2021 and 2027, Greece has 26 billion in general. So 21 of them is European contribution and 5 billion is the national contribution. And from this money, a significant part is allocated for what we call green projects, of how we will make our national targets in climate and energy become a reality. So we are going to take full advantage of them. Here, what we describe is not just, a Greek case. It is something that goes beyond, and I think all over the world.
So what message should they take away about what you've achieved and what they can learn from your experiment? Is this something that can be multiplied and accelerated elsewhere? It doesn't need the specific case of an island surrounded by sea without any connection to the main supply of electricity. There's something, my sense is there's something more happening here. You're proving a concept.
Thank you for saying this and for recognize. I don't know if I should comment on this, but yes,
well, you
you're
can
right.
Say I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Listen, we started with, we do this in parallel, but in Greece, the Greek islands have the complexities by nature, because as we explained, there are a lot of islands, they are isolated, they get a lot of tourism. So here it's an opportunity to transform the model of those islands into something new and sustainable. And of course, here is the branding, let's say, of the case. And we all see in the last years that tourists have become even more conscious when they choose where to go. And so if the place there doesn't use the natural resources on the way it should, then next time he might not go there. If he sees, for example, that there is waste everywhere, or they don't do recycling, or they burn diesel or whatever. So absolutely, for us, here this challenge is quite visionary, but it can be pragmatic. And then, you're right, we want to take this example and take it outside the islands and transfer it, of course, everywhere. We already do this in Greece, in the mainland, but it's easier there. It's easier because you don't have the complexities that you have on the islands, which have, are difficult because their energy systems are different, they're isolated place. Investments wouldn't become easier on an island rather than on a mainland.
Let me backtrack a little bit onto what we began to talk about, the socio-economic, the sociological impact. What have you discovered? Okay, these are small communities, but essentially, when it's multiplied and scaled up, when it comes to acceptability, change of lifestyle, change of the way they're living, change of the way they're running their household, change for the more conservative minds, used to farming in a certain way, doing things, fishing in a certain way. What have you discovered about the adaptability of people towards this new technology, particularly if it doesn't cost them too much?
First of all, let me say that the Greek islands are not uniform. So there are Greek islands that are poor, there are Greek islands that are very rich, there are Greek islands that are very small, there are Greek islands that are quite large. So you have a large variety that makes the endeavor even more challenging. So we have seen that given the fact also that the energy cost on the islands is much higher than the energy cost at the mainland, it makes a good sense from an economic point of view, and that's a great basis to start with. And right now, to make the connection with the actual situation all over the world, the fact that we have such high energy prices gives a unique opportunity to the green transition, because we all see that it makes also sense, even the most skeptical ones.
But do the people who live on the island see it that way as well?
Yes, yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Do they see that reluctantly or with enthusiasm?
I think it's
Can
easier.
I
in
will
the
give you an
small
example.
islands,
I will give you an
it's easier.
example, Nick. Imagine you're living in Halki, the island we show, which is an isolated island of 700 people. It's an isolated, so let's suppose that you need a doctor, right? But the doctor comes every week on the island. He's coming from another island, from another bigger island. Because this is a smaller, and the smaller one is connected to the bigger. So you wait from him every Wednesday, for example, but due to bad weather conditions, the boat doesn't come on Wednesday, so you have to wait until the next Wednesday.
But don't you do it on the internet these days?
So the Greco Islands initiative, that's why we insist a lot on the innovation part and the pillar. In the Halki, we made the telemedicine system, which gives obviously the possibility to someone. Well, this was not for granted before. It's part of this approach. And also, let me give you another important example now that the energy crisis is influencing all citizens around Europe. Imagine that you were paying your electricity bill with a lot of euros now that the energy is quite high. What we did by installing a solar plant on the island of Halki through, again, an innovative system, virtual net metering, was to connect the solar, to have a social impact, first of all. This power plant has a social impact on all households and all businesses. So after 1 year of implementation, locals, they don't pay anything for their energy.
I bet they like that.
So
But that's a big difference. That's a great way of encouraging people.
So I think that it speaks by itself whether local people, adapt themselves or they are reluctant or not. Could someone be reluctant when you tell him that you won't pay any more for the energy?
We're almost out of time. Who'd like to come in? Who's got a big question? Do we have a microphone, or should I walk across? It's all right. I've got a microphone here.
Hello, my name is Angelica, or Angeliki, and can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. My name is Angelica or Angeliki, and I'm from Melbourne, but my parents were born in Chios in Greece. And so we're from a very small village called Sklavia. And my family, we're a farming family. So when you're talking about what you're talking about, whether local people really understand and whether they agree with the climate crisis and the urgency of these amazing ideas, really, I think I'd have to disagree a little bit with what you're saying, because from my perspective and what I see with my family is they don't understand the urgency of the crisis. They see what's in front of them. They see the urgency and the need of their food and putting food on the table and, you know, farming their potatoes or their kokari. I don't know what the English word is, sorry. But they see what's in front of them. And so I guess what I would like to propose perhaps is more climate education for these families, for these villagers and these islanders who didn't have the best education growing up, and even their kids aren't having the best education without going to Athens or Thessaloniki or, you know, other places in Europe. So perhaps I'd love to hear what Greece's plans are for climate education on the islands and in these villages. Are there any plans for that? And if so, how are you going about it?
Thank you. Pass the microphone back. And of course, Australia's been through its own education about climate change in a big way with the election of Albanese. Please.
Shouldn't they respond to the question
Well,
first?
let's hear what you're thinking first.
Okay, so my name is Angelos. I'm from Athens, but I've been working abroad in the UK for almost 10 years. I work in the energy storage industry in the UK, and just a bit of context on the question that's coming, I've been involved in about 300 megawatts of energy storage in England and about 100 megawatts of gas peaker plants again in England. Just to touch on, to use a point that Nick made earlier, these projects are all proofs of concept, essentially. We know that it is feasible to make a net zero island, a zero waste island, correct? But scaling this up to the whole of Greece is a very capital intensive process, a lengthy process, and a very laborsome and technically intensive process as well. So my question to you is, do you think that the ministry can do something to provide financial security in order to attract foreign investment into the market for energy assets? That's one part of the question. And the second one is, do you think current legislation in Greece is at a place where it can support new technologies, such as batteries, such as hydrogen, such as whatever might come in the next decade?
All right.
Thanks.
Alexandra, Peter.
Very right questions. Thank you for that. Let's start with the first one. Although I think regarding the second one, the proper person would be the Minister of Energy, who is here to reply. Perhaps he could make a comment on this.
The microphone is heading his way. He can't escape
What
unless
we
he walks
do as
out.
a country to attract investments, because you answered this, Minister, half an hour before to someone else who made the same question. You're right about awareness on climate change issues. We need a lot of work here. We are not there. Yes, on a theoretical base, we all say that we have to do things, but practically speaking, especially people who are living, as you said, in villages, in remote areas, their priorities, daily life, the difficulties they face, their income, and all these issues. So absolutely we have to do, and this of course falls under the competence of Ministry of Education. Climate change has to start from the very early
But Alexandra,
ages.
can I just check?
Yeah.
Are you seeing very clear evidence, even if the data is quite young at the moment, of a significant change? It's my question at the third time I've asked it. But are you seeing a significant change in mindset and awareness because this has been encouraged in these islands?
In these specific islands, yes, we have already witnessed this, especially in Tilos also, for example, where we implemented the waste management and the circular economy.
So it's made them more conscious.
Yes, we see that every house doesn't throw the waste as it did before. They're very conscious how to recycle, how to take the bag, each separate bag wherever. They are fully engaged in having, an island that is that is recycling 100% whatever it has. And I think that this is easier in smaller communities. Of course, you need to inspire them, you need to engage them, and ultimately they must have a benefit from this, either a personal benefit or a social benefit in the place where they live.
Peter, do you want to pick up the other question? Or do you want to leave it to your minister?
We've done a lot of things during the last 3 years in terms of attracting investments in the energy sector, but of course, I guess everyone in every country faces those challenges. As far as Greece is concerned, I believe that Greece is on a completely different position as it was 3 years ago. And now, of course, with all these European challenges after the crisis and, of course, the war, we are even more conscious, I mean, all European countries. And absolutely, I believe that in the next 2 to 3 years, the energy landscape will be completely different as we all urge to decarbonize our systems and reduce our dependency. Now, if I can speak about the renewable sector, for example, in Greece. From the beginning, Greece back in 2019 set very ambitious targets in terms of renewables penetration by 2030. And I'm quite proud that with the policies we have implemented in the ministry, here is the minister, Mr. Skrekas, and through the policy reforms and some regulatory frameworks we have enacted in storage, for example, or in offshore wind projects, we are in a position now to say that and be optimistic or even confident that we will achieve these targets by 2030 much earlier in the years to come. But
Minister, you're nodding agreement there, so pick up the microphone and give us your answer to this.
I think that the question was if green transition is more costly for consumers than conventional ways of producing energy. So now that the technology...
Could you hold the microphone a little closer?
Now that technology has evolved, I think that green transition pays back. So regarding islands, for example, a hybrid system based on renewables is cheaper than using the conventional diesel generators. You know very well, maybe the cost of electricity megawatt hour from the sun is about 40 euro per megawatt hour, 50 euro, 60 euro, let's say. If we pass it through the battery, it might arrive to 100, 120 euro, maybe 140 euro per megawatt hour. The cost using diesel to generate electricity is around 200 euro per megawatt hour. So right now, there is no this dilemma. There is no dilemma that if green transition is more expensive, green transition is cheaper. Green transition is cheaper. Green transition reduces significantly carbon emissions, and green transition offers security of supply and energy security. As Alexandra said, currently Greece, I don't know if someone else of my very good cooperators here said, Greece is among the first 8 nations in the world regarding the renewables contribution into our electricity grid. 46% of the electricity consumption of the local demand is fully covered by renewables. And we expect that in 3 years' time, 60% will come from renewables. And the revised target is that 80% of the local consumption, electricity consumption in 2030 should come by renewables. A few days ago, we had, during 5 consecutive hours, all the local needs and all the exports of electricity from Greece to Bulgaria, to Italy, to Albania, to North Macedonia, covered 100% from renewable generation. So that shows that Greece is progressing very fast, and I think that it shows the way to Europe as well.
Let me ask you one other question as you're the politician here. Is this a vote winner, this scheme? In other words, are those who are affected by this seeing it as positive and therefore seeing it as something they feel politically allied to? Because there are many countries where green operations and green schemes are seen as a threat as opposed to an asset. What's your assessment?
Let me say that for sure we should do much more things in terms of communicating as politicians what are the benefits of the green transition and what are the benefits of renewables entering into our energy mix. Let me say that currently, for example, we are suffering of skyrocketing electricity prices in Greece because of the energy crisis. You know that still 46% comes from renewables, but another 40% of the electricity consumption comes from gas. So we're very much exposed on gas, and especially on Russian gas, although we try to diversify very fast. So right now we have a subsidy scheme. Who is financing the subsidy scheme is the renewables. The renewables are the electricity generators that reduce prices.
Are you therefore
prices.
feeling pressure to do these many more of these schemes
Of course.
much quicker?
That's why we strongly believe that this energy crisis finally leads us to a much faster green energy transition. Let me say an example again coming from Greece. During the years from 2015 to 2019, we were deploying only 300 to 400 megawatts of new renewables, additional renewables every year. This year, 2022, we will construct and connect into the grid, not just construct, more than 2,000 megawatts. So we have increased by 5 times the penetration rate of renewables into electricity grid. Partly because we believed it right from the beginning. So when we took office, our Prime Minister set as a first priority the increasing of renewables into our energy mix. But lately, because this is a necessity to maintain affordable prices for the consumers, for the households, and with predictability for the businesses. And of course, more than anything else, to reduce CO2 emissions and protect the environment, of course, and our planet.
Minister, thank you very much. Anyone else want to come in quickly? Yes, one more question. Microphone.
So my question would go back to the islands. You said that you've worked on 20 islands, and the biggest one was Naxos in this case, which was 2.5 thousand. 25, okay. But we also know that Greece has a lot bigger islands. What has the transition looked like from the very small islands and the communities? As you said, it's really easy to make a transition, or easier, I guess, because it's a small community. What has it looked like in the bigger islands, and what will it look like in the even bigger ones that are still not green or haven't gone through this transition?
Well, we are not yet there, to be honest, in the bigger islands. So this Greco Islands initiative starts with the isolated islands, with the smaller ones, with the non-interconnected ones in the energy systems. And we want to test and moving at the end to the bigger ones like Crete, for example, which has 600,000 of population and definitely faces bigger challenges in energy and in the environment. So when we talk about the Greco Islands initiative, we speak about all Greek islands. We want all Greek islands to be transformed into new models of sustainable way of behaving from an energy and environmental point of view. Given that, this takes time, It's quite complicated and needs a lot of effort and needs the engagement, as you mentioned, Nick, from local authorities, from local people. We showcased here 4 islands to see from where we started. Now what we are doing at this moment is a master plan by mapping the needs of each island, and for every sector that I mentioned under the Greco Islands Initiative, for every pillar. And as we map the needs, we move forward with the next ones. But our vision still is, as we move forward to 2030 and, of course, to climate neutrality by 2050, we want to transform all these systems into smart and green.
Right, but there's obviously an urgency. We've got a couple of minutes left. Let me ask you your final thought. Let's have a takeoff moment here. Let's an accelerator moment, a multiplier moment, because I'm struck by the kind of outcomes you're looking for about how to exchange and coordinate, how to optimize action, how to minimize risks and maximize benefits, and above all, knowledge sharing of the acquis achieved by Greece on mitigation on the islands, the challenges and the outcomes. In other words, how much do you now want to share this, both within Greece and beyond Greece, among the member nations of the European Union and beyond? Peter.
Yeah, we want the small island first to be the seeds of change. They can be used as models for larger islands that obviously they need more capital to be invested, much more capital. The more the size grows, the more money you need to make the change. But you need to plant these seeds that will allow for the rest of the people, being the Greek citizens or being the tourists that come to the country, to see that this is something real, because the island is a small system. So they see that this can work in this small scale, and this is worth trying to have it in a larger scale, because we need not to forget that even our countries were isolated systems a few years ago. A few years ago, Greece was not connected to Bulgaria, was not connected to North Macedonia or to Albania or to Italy. The same way that the islands are isolated and we take them out of this isolation through the green transition process, the same way goes for the countries, if you see the large scale.
Alexandra, so your message about the takeoff, how this can be now disseminated and used as an inspiration for others.
Exactly. I think that as a closing remark, Greco Islands Initiative is an innovative policy that could inspire across the world. And of course, the challenge here is to mobilize all this funding, European funding, international funding as well, attract businesses and companies, even startup companies that have nice ideas to test. You mentioned Volkswagen. Volkswagen decided to come in the Astipala and try autonomous driving, for example, which is something completely new. Why Volkswagen has chosen Astipala? Obviously not to have a local benefit there, but to test it there and then deploy it everywhere. The same stands also for the telos and the waste management solutions. So I think that by the time, and as we see how all this technology is implemented on a local level, obviously we want to have a local benefit. We want these local benefits to be within the framework of the national benefit for Greece, but then it goes much broader and beyond, as you said. Here we have a European challenge, first of all, to meet these climate targets, and ultimately is a global challenge. And I think all countries face the same challenges here, the same climate challenges, and I'm pretty sure that all countries do their best to achieve these targets and these challenges. It's quite hard, I would say, but I'm optimistic at the end that we can inspire, at least through these
That was
projects.
the word on my mind. There's inspiration to take away from this. Even if there's a cost, the public will be convinced and can be excited by this, hastened by the horror of what's happened in Ukraine. So thank you both very much indeed. Oh, he's gone. And the minister too. Where is he? Ah, minister. Have you moved so you get another go with the microphone? Thank you very much, Minister. And thank you all very much for coming. I think we should be inspired by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.